Yo, 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 welcome back to Son of a Preacher Man. As always, Soapman is in the house. We've been following this story. So far, so good. Everything the Bible says adds up. And in one way or another, we find evidence of everything the Bible has said so far. We find evidence that the Tigris and Euphrates do exist. They merge like the Bible says. There were two other rivers, though they're now dried up. They once existed as the Bible said. We found evidence that there was once land where there's now water in the Persian Gulf. It was once land. And so it kind of leads you to believe that it was probably a Garden of Eden there. So I've been talking about the Sumerian people, and I want to explain to you who they are and where they fit into the narrative. So in southern Mesopotamia, because that's where we're talking about, in southern Mesopotamia, the people who lived around the area where the Garden of Eden would have been were called the Sumerians. The place that they lived was called Sumer. And you see that here on your map. Here are, three of the cities that they founded: Uruk, Eridu, and they founded other cities such as Larsa and Umma, and a few more. So these people, they weren't people who would have lived in the Garden of Eden, but they were the people who lived next door. They were the neighbors. So when Adam and Eve get kicked out of the Garden of Eden, where do you think they went? They could have only went north, south, or I'm sorry, not south. They could have only went east, west, or north. They couldn't have went south unless they lived underwater. So they had to most likely have ran into the people of Sumer, or at least that's what I believe, and I'm going to show you why. So don't you think that it would be wise to talk to the people who were neighbors to Adam and Eve? Do you think if we can't talk to Adam and Eve, that the next best thing would be to talk to their neighbors and the people who would have lived in the area, or around the area where Adam and Eve came from? You think they may have something important to say? These are the Sumerians. The slide you're looking at is one of their depictions. It's a copy of a relief they made. And if you see my pointer here, there's a lot to be learned from this picture. Follow my pointer here, it's at the top. It's gonna go straight down. This seems to be the head dude. I'm not gonna go into a lot of this. I simply want to point out that this may look like a very boring, old, ancient picture to you, but there is a lot to be learned from this picture. Look at the guy in charge. Look at how he's dressed. He's a priestly figure. You see the guys running up next to him. You see the guys in front of him are priestly figures. The guys behind him, they are armed with axes. You see a guy with a wagon. That tells you wagons were in use as far back as 3500 BCE. That's what that tells you. People were using horses to pull wagons as far as 3500 BCE. Let's go down to the second row. You see soldiers. Look at how they're dressed. Look at these guys' faces. Big, humongous noses on each and every one of them. There's a lot to be learned from these pictures. All these soldiers have swords. So that lets you know the way people fought in battle, even as far back as 3500 BCE. You see guys who are dressed as farmers. Look at this bottom row. A lot of people, a lot of different cultures try to claim that they were the first cultures to use chariots. But you see in this relief, the Sumerians used chariots in warfare. The Sumerians recorded the first war ever in history. And this relief shows that they used chariots in warfare as far back as 3,500, 3,000 BCE. That's almost 5,000 years ago. So when we look at these reliefs of the Sumerians, look at these reliefs. Look at this head guy. Look at the head honcho. Look at how he's dressed. Again, look at the pictures of these men. Big noses. I keep saying big noses because black people so ignorant. A lot of black people try to say that the Sumerians is black because they want everybody to be black. But look at these big old noses on these do these people look black to you? They do not look black to me. Furthermore, there's plenty of evidence to show that the Sumerians were not black. Not to say it wasn't black people around. When have black people not been around? Black people is always everywhere. But to just say a whole people is black so that you can feel better about yourself is really asinine. So if you look at this middle row, you can see cattle. These people kept cattle. They herded sheep. They kept goats. If you look at this bottom row, you can see people with different tools, donkeys, agriculture tools. They were farmers. They were cattle herders. They were sheep herders. They were priests. Look at this guy on the top row in the top right. He's got a harp. They had an understanding of these things. In fact, they were the most advanced culture and civilization of their time. They were the first people to have schools, to form governments. They recorded the first war. They brought writing. You know, they are credited with starting writing. You know what I mean? To this day, we base a lot of our systems off of things that they started. For instance, the idea of it being 60 seconds in a minute and 60 minutes in an hour came from the Sumerians. They were the ones to first come up with writing systems. They were the first ones to come up with certain mathematical systems and structures and certain ways to look at time. And even to this day, we base a lot of what we know and what we do and what we learn off of how they did it, because they did it right and they were so advanced for their time period. Now, why do you think the Sumerians were so advanced? Because the Sumerians didn't just gradually get advanced. They popped up on the scene out of nowhere and were super advanced. My question to you is, why do you think that was? The Sumerians built temples called ziggurats. They were some of the ancient wonders of the world. They were far too sophisticated and complex for simple primitive people to construct, or so it would seem. But the Sumerians were so far ahead of their time and so highly advanced, they were able to pull it off. This is a recreation of an actual ziggurat in Iraq. You could go there and see it today. You can Google it. Imagine being in ancient caveman times and walking up and seeing this structure. It would have been like nothing you ever saw in your life. Now, I know to you, it probably looked like a bunch of Legos. But 5,000 years ago, your eyes would have never set sights on something like what you're looking at in this slide. And so to other cultures, the Sumerians were like ancient Atlanteans. They were like aliens. Everybody copied them. Everybody used their learning systems. Everybody copied their religion. Everybody used their writing system. Everybody mimicked the Sumerians. And if you think this place is like, I'm just making this place up, there is historical evidence for everything I'm saying. The Bible mentions Sumer. It says Nimrod set up his kingdom in Sumer. It says that Noah settled in the land of Sumer. The Bible speaks of Sumer. History speaks of Sumer. Archaeology speaks of Sumer. All this is real, folks. And these Sumerians were a very advanced people, and it's things like this ziggurat temple that is evidence of how advanced they were. They built this 5,000 years ago. My question to you is, why do you think that the Sumerians were so advanced in that they had these advanced systems and were able to erect structures as sophisticated and complicated as this step pyramid or step-like pyramid called a ziggurat? Why were they able to do that? Could it be that an advanced people taught the Sumerians to be advanced? Could it be that the Sumerians weren't just an advanced people all on their own? Let me ask you, would it make sense to you that when Adam and Eve got kicked out of the Garden of Eden, that they went north into Sumer and settled with the Sumerians and taught those people what they knew? Would that not explain how the Sumerians just come up on the scene out of nowhere and are super advanced, much more advanced than anyone around them? Is that plausible to you? Because we know Adam and Eve get kicked out of the Garden of Eden. They have to go somewhere. We know Adam and Eve and that family, they're special. And we would expect that wherever they went when they got kicked out of the Garden of Eden, they're going to make an impact on wherever they go. They're going to impress people. They're going to be remembered. People are going to tell stories about them and write about them forever. So where could Adam and Eve have went when they got kicked out of the Garden of Eden? Do you think it's just a coincidence? Do you think it's just luck? Do you think it's just coincidence that the people who live just north of where the Garden of Eden would have been just miraculously became super advanced out of nowhere all on their own? Or is it more plausible that Adam and Eve migrated north and taught those people how to be civilized and helped them develop the capacity to be sophisticated and advanced? Okay, so this is the Sumerian king list. We've just talked about the Sumerians a little bit. You know they were the people from southern Mesopotamia. And they would have lived just north of where the Garden of Eden was. And what the Sumerian kings list is exactly what the title suggests that it is. It is a list of the kings of Sumeria in the order in which they ruled from the first king, and it goes down through hundreds of their kings. These people were a very special people in that they were the first, one of the first people, along with the Egyptians, they were the first people to develop a writing system. And they kept a written record of their kings. They also wrote about the many gods that they believed in. They also wrote one of the first creation stories describing how the universe was created. Yes, they did that. The Sumerian creation story predates the biblical creation story by over 2,000 years. I'm not wrong about those numbers. The Sumerian creation story is very similar to the biblical creation story. The only difference is, in the Sumerian creation story, there are many gods, and in the biblical creation story, there is one God. That's the biggest difference. There are other minor differences, but that's the biggest difference. But the creation story told by the Sumerians predates the biblical one by thousands, plural, of years. So I'm emphasizing that the Sumerians could write. And they have what's called the Sumerian king list. Now imagine our experts when they first took a look at this thing. It's written in what we call cuneiform. The Sumerians, this was their distinct way of writing, in these little marks. And if you look at it, it just looks like the design pattern of a rug. You couldn't decipher what this says if you were given a lifetime. It don't look like nothing. It looked like tile that you would put on your kitchen floor. So it looked like cobblestone that you would lay outside. But eventually we did learn to decipher it. And what we found blew the expert's mind. It was a list of kings, and it had the number of years that they reigned. Now, this is hard to read. I'll just read the first few. The first ruler is listed as Elulim, and it said that he reigned 28,000 years, 28,800 years. The next king after him reigned for 36,000 years. The third king, Inmen Luana, reigned for 43,200 years. Folks, when experts first deciphered cuneiform and discovered the Sumerian king list, they didn't pay much heed to it because we all know it's impossible for someone to live for 20, 30, 40,000 years. And that's exactly what the Sumerian king list is suggesting. Where it's not suggesting it, it's flat out saying it. So people didn't put much weight into the Sumerian king list initially. We were just happy we could decipher the cuneiform to see what it said. But eventually people start noticing something. About a decade or so ago, people start noticing similarities between the Sumerian king list and the holy line of Adam. Yeah, I know that's hard. That's a hard pill to swallow, but hear me out. People start noticing and they start comparing the Sumerian king list to the biblical line of Adam. Now you see how I'm trying to amalgamate, how I'm trying to assimilate, how I'm trying to associate the Sumerian king list with the story of Adam and Eve. I know what I'm saying may be new to a lot of people, and I'm running short on time, and I'm gonna have to cut it short right here. But in my next episode, I'm going to show you how the Sumerian king list doesn't just compare to Adam's bloodline, it's synonymous. They're the same thing. The Sumerian king list is the same list as the list of Adam and his descendants. And I'm going to prove it to you in my next episode. folks, I want to thank you for joining me for this episode of Son of a Preacher Man. If you got any comments, likes or dislikes, please leave them in the comments section. You got any complaints? You want to argue about nothing? Leave it in the comments section. I'll see you next episode. Same soap time, same soap channel. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Peace.